So this is an issue that's been happening for a while, but it seems to be especially bad in the last week or so. Dangerous criminals with extensive criminal histories who are getting out of jail on bond. Whose fault is this? These are people who have been arrested dozens of times, who are violent, who are somehow getting bond. Is it the judge's fault? Is it the DA's fault? Is it bail reform? I'm digging into it for this episode of Brian Enton Investigates. Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my podcast. Really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. I'm actually in a Jeep. I got a rental Jeep, which is pretty cool. I've never gotten one of these before when I've been on the road. But I'm digging in this episode into issues with bail. And I've been noticing, especially with some of the cases that I've been covering over the last week, it seems to be happening again and again. These people who have serious criminal histories, and I mean violent criminal history, seem to be getting out on bail for some reason and then committing other really awful crimes, even sometimes murder. And I've noticed it's like sometimes you cover a story and you hear about someone who did something that's not that serious and they're locked up with no bond. But then you hear about someone who's been arrested like 20 times, violent stuff, and somehow they get another bond. And I wanted to understand why this is happening. Let me walk you through some of the cases that have stood out to me over the last week or so. First of all, a wild story out of Louisville, Kentucky. 22-year-old Armand Langford, a man arrested after kidnapping a mother and two kids on a way to a bank robbery. The judge now under fire for early release in that case. 32-year-old Armand was arrested Friday, allegedly kidnapping a woman and her two kids, forcing her to drive to a bank, demanding $20,000 from the bank teller, stabbing the woman, and then running away and leading police on over 6-hour manhunt. Well, police have now revealed that Langford had been sentenced to 14 years in prison in 2024 for a string of similar crimes. And according to the court docs I was just looking over, Langford either robbed or attempted to rob 22 people as they were withdrawing cash from ATMs between August 2021 and November 2021. So robbed 22 people, somehow got out on bond. The argument the lawyer made was that he was so shocked by the short time in prison that he would not reoffend again when released. He got released and now guess what? Arrested for kidnapping a mother and two kids. Then there's Austin Drummond, the guy in Tennessee I was covering. You know, remember there was the manhunt and then he was finally found and charged with quadruple murder. Well, guess what? He was also out on bond. How did he get a bond? The deal with him is after getting out of prison last year in a robbery case, Drummond was charged with trying to kill someone while incarcerated, was out on bond. Authorities have now said his criminal history dates back to 2013. He was just 16 years old, robbed a Circle K, pulled out a pistol, pointed it at a store employee, demanded money in the cash register. He was convicted in 2014 of aggravated robbery, sentenced to 10 years in prison. This is where it gets interesting with Drummond. After the trial, he called his father from behind bars and made threats against his jurors and the robbery victim. In 2015, pleaded guilty to retaliation. Was sentenced to another 3 years in prison. DA opposed him getting parole, calling him a dangerous felony offender, but then he faced new charges related to his time in prison. There was a drug arrest the day he was released, then attempted murder charge for something he did in prison. All of this to say he got out on bond. He made bond, and he was out on bond when police say he committed this quadruple murder last week. So again, dangerous guy out on bond. And then there's Jesse Calhoun, the Jesse Calhoun case. That's the one I did just a couple of days ago. The accused serial killer, which no one seems to be covering for some reason, in Oregon. He's got a crazy backstory when it comes to this kind of thing. He was in prison serving a 4-year term for assaulting a police officer, trying to strangle a police dog, burglary, other charges. He was initially released in 2021, a year early because he helped fight wildfires in 2020 under a prison firefighting program. So this wasn't bond, but it was he apparently went to fight the wildfires and they let him out early. Governor Tina Kotek revoked the commutation in 2023 when police began investigating him in the deaths, but he had been let out early. So why is this happening? I've seen it on a case-by-case basis. I know that there's been bail reform in the past. But why is this still happening? What's the breakdown here? Again, is it the judge's fault? Is it the district attorney's fault? I wanted to understand. I interviewed, you're going to hear this, John Flynn. He was the president of the National District Attorneys Association, former DA in New York. And he broke it down for me. He explained what's going on here. So, Mr. Flynn, you're the former Erie County District Attorney. You were also the president of the National District Attorneys Association. So you know a lot about bail and bail reform.
Correct.
Uh, I just highlighted several cases just in the last week that I found to be sort of disturbing, shocking that people are getting out on bail for like these serious crimes when they've got these criminal histories. Has this just gone too far in terms of bail reform? Like, where do things sort of stand, do you think, nationwide?
Oh, it's definitely gone too far. There's no question about that. I mean, you started off, probably 5 or 6 years ago, right before COVID, with, kind of a nationwide determination that, there were too many people that were in jail on pretrial confinement. Okay, again, you got to remember that there's two different types of people who are incarcerated in this country: those who are incarcerated during and pending their prosecution, and those who are incarcerated after they've been found guilty, pled guilty, and have been sentenced. Okay, so put that second category aside. We're just talking now about the first category, about people who are potentially gonna be in a jail while their case is being prosecuted. And so you had a belief in this country that there were too many people who were in custody awaiting trial, especially too many people who were in custody who had committed minor offenses, misdemeanors, nonviolent crimes, who were given a bail by a judge of, say, $1,000. And I, before I was DA, I was a judge. Okay, so I got to be honest with you, I did it all the time. Okay, someone came in, low level, nonviolent offense, and I'd put like a minimum amount of bail, $1,000 on the person. Okay, what you saw across the country was the individual in South Central LA who can't afford $1,000. He's stuck in jail for the same charge that a guy in Beverly Hills who has $1,000 and gets out on bail. Okay, so there was clearly a financial disparity here, that kind of spilled over into a racial disparity, to be honest with you. So people thought, hey, we need some changes. But Brian, what has happened over the course of the past 5, 6 years is that, like everything else in society here, we go from one extreme to another. Okay, and there's no common sense middle ground here. And unfortunately, we're in a spot now where a, a lot of states, especially New York, where I'm most familiar with, they have gone way too far with the bail policies. And we're unfortunately in a situation where public safety is being threatened.
So is it the district attorneys who are fighting for to keep these dangerous criminals behind bars and the judges are the ones saying no? I mean, whose fault is it?
Well, there's a lot of blame to go around. It's uh, you know, I look back, especially here in New York. I look back to what happened in 2019. And at the time, I was a district attorney for a couple years. I was kind of just getting involved in the national organizations and even in our state organization. And I don't we tried, but we obviously didn't do a good enough job as district attorneys to fight what was happening in our state capital here in New York. And unfortunately, what happened in New York and what happens all across the country is that you have activist organizations, you have legal aid, public defenders. basically the criminal defense bar in states across the country, they're the ones who are writing the bail reform statutes. They're acting as kind of like lobbyists per se. And they're getting in touch with and in contact with state houses across the country, and they're proposing these bail reform statutes. And, those of us in law enforcement, the district attorneys, the police, the sheriffs, we weren't as mobilized and organized back, 6 years ago when this was all happening. And unfortunately, I think we tried, we just didn't get it done, obviously. And so, we're the blame, obviously starts with, some of these state houses across the country who have, like I said before, just gone too far. But there are occasions, though, especially, here in Buffalo when I was district attorney, where cases that were eligible for bail, where a judge could have set bail on someone, that they didn't. And so, obviously, we as a society gotta pay more of attention as to who we elect as judges, and make sure that judges are held accountable for letting people out when they shouldn't.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, regardless of what the policy is, can't a judge say, oh my gosh, this person has this insane criminal history, repeat offender, hasn't learned their lessons in the past. The probable cause is there in this case, and no, you're not getting bond. I mean, do they have to be giving these bonds?
Well, not in New York, and not in other states. So in New York, we have a bail statute that identifies. It's like a list, Brian. All right, there's a list of offenses where a judge is allowed to set bail on. Everything else, a judge cannot set bail. So if your crime is not on that list, and the list in New York is kind of categorized, in terms of violent felonies. So obviously murder, rape, robbery, et cetera, et cetera. They're all on the list of where judges can put bail on someone. But pretty much every misdemeanor, and believe it or not, some non-violent felonies are not on the list. So if an individual, no matter what their criminal history, no matter what their record about coming back to court is, all right, that judge in New York and other states as well cannot set bail on that person.
Crazy. And the Ricky Crouch case, that's one you worked on, right? In Erie.
Well, that's a recent one right here,
Yeah.
that happened.
What
So
happened?
yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
all the details. I just heard it was something like
yeah,
it was crazy.
yeah, and that, well, in that case though, that really isn't a bail reform case though. I mean, technically, because in that case, the judge could have set bail. The judge actually did set bail, initially on his first offense. The DA asked for no bail, keep him in with no bail, but the judge put like $50,000 bail on him. All right. He made the bail, he posted the bond and got out. And then when he was arrested a second time, the DA's office asked for more bail, and the judge didn't put it on. He got out again a second time, and then unfortunately, killed his ex-girlfriend, a day later. So, that case really isn't about bail reform, like I said, per se, unless you look at it from 30,000 feet, which, a lot of times you kind of need to, because what's happened in New York over the course of the past 6 years, even though our current governor, and even our previous governor too, he modified it once as well. And our current governor has modified it twice now over the course of the past 6 years. Even with the modifications, we're still under a system where judges have now it's been ingrained in them for the past 6 years to let people out. The underlining premise when bail reform started back in 2020 here and in other states is that you want to put the least restrictive measures on people. There's a presumption of release. And thirdly, you're supposed to evaluate the individual's ability to pay, what their financial circumstances are. And, quite frankly, all three of them I'm in disagreement with. All right. If you think about it, an individual's financial circumstances should not matter at all. Okay. What should matter is public safety. And unfortunately, we still don't have that here in New York.
Are there any cases that still bother you from when you were DA? I mean, was this a common thing where you'd be like, how the heck? You'd hear from your prosecutors and be like, how the heck did this guy skip bond?
Yeah, there were a lot. And in the first couple of years, there were more than others because what you're seeing is that, and what we saw specifically in the first couple of years here in New York, because that was right in the middle of COVID. All right, in New York, the bail reform statute took effect on January 1st, 2020. We hit COVID in March of 2020. So in the first year of bail reform, it just so happened to coincide with a dramatic increase in crime. And it wasn't just in New York, it was across the country. So we were dealing with the implications of bail reform right in the middle of COVID. And fortunately, what happened was our state representatives and our governor, to their credit and his credit, made a change, and they made a change kind of within the first year to target repeat offenders. And that was my biggest frustration, Brian. My biggest frustration with the whole bail reform initially was repeat offenders, those who were out on a crime, who committed another crime, and they got let out. And they weren't held in the very first time to begin with, so they got out and committed a second crime. That changed within the first year here in New York, where we entered into a situation where a judge could put bail on someone under a harm analysis, meaning that if the original crime was a crime that harmed someone or was a harm to property, and they were out, and then they committed a second crime that also harmed someone or property, then the judge could go back and put bail on him on the first offense. So
Mm.
that solved a lot of problems, in my opinion, and helped us out tremendously. But again, to my opinion, it still really didn't solve the problem, and we're still dealing with now with too many people who should not be out on bail. They should be held in custody, awaiting trial, and are harming members of our community.
And you're a Democrat, right?
I am a Democrat. Yeah, I'm a Democrat who, to be perfectly honest with you, I was, and like I alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, you know, I'm okay with bail reform. All right, because again, I got a problem with a kid stealing a candy bar at Walmart. All right. And then being in jail on bail. All right. I mean, again, I think we can all can agree that unless that kid has got or young man and woman has got a serious criminal record or never comes to court or, is a problem child, you know, stealing a candy bar at Walmart, you shouldn't be sitting in jail awaiting trial. Okay. So I think we all can agree on that. So I got no problem with bail reform. As a matter of fact, even before our bail reform took place on January 1st, 2020, I had implemented kind of my own bail reform here in Buffalo. I got elected in 2016, took office on January 1st, 2017. Within a couple of years, I was under the conclusion that there are too many people who are in pretrial custody, all right, especially for low level crimes. So I started telling my assistant district attorneys that if it's a misdemeanor and no one got hurt and the guy or girl doesn't have a long criminal history, they're not a flight risk, don't ask for bail.
Mm.
Okay. And so just by my own internal policy, by doing that, we here in Erie County, which is Buffalo, we had about 1,000 people in pretrial confinement in 2018 when I started this. And on December 31st, 2019, a little over a year later, when bail reform was going to start the next day, we only had 400 in pretrial confinement. So I was able to reduce the pretrial confinement population by over 60% just on kind of my own policy.
Was
So
there anything you regretted about that? Or
no,
was that just
no,
people that were not dangerous?
correct. Correct. They were. It was all misdemeanors. It was all nonviolent misdemeanors, and there were no extenuating circumstances. And to be honest with you, in that year period, I was doing that. All right, I don't remember anything to come back and bite me in the tail at all. No, there may have been again, if someone calls in or someone writes in and says, "Oh, what about this guy?" I'll stand corrected. But I can't think right now of any case where someone who shouldn't have been out, did something wrong. And so, I got no regrets doing that. And so I think that you see where I'm coming from initially, that I got no problem with bail reform,
Mm.
but they just went way too far here. And they've gone too far, Brian, all across the country in certain states. Again, because I saw that when I was president of the National DA Association, and I talked to DAs all across the country. I traveled all across the country, and I saw that states that implemented bail reform kind of did the same thing that they did in New York, where they went too far.
It almost reminds me of like defunding the police, that whole movement.
Oh God, yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
similar, like some of the ideas were okay, more training, more, but then it suddenly became this like anti-police and people like thinking they didn't need the police. It kind of feels the same, like it just went too
Oh,
far.
oh, absolutely. I mean, the defund the police movement was just a ridiculous movement if you think about it. All right. Again, the 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 thought process of reasonable people is that we can incorporate with the police mental health providers, and social workers and those who work in fields in the community where we can deal with the mental health crisis that is going on, in our country. All right, there's no problem with that right there, but that's an augmentation. It's not a replacement, okay? You can't get rid of a police officer and add in a social worker, all right? It doesn't work that way, okay? You can augment with a social worker, you can augment with a mental health counselor, all right? There's no problem there at all right? But you can't get rid of a police officer. So again, yeah, that movement was absurd. It had no basis in reality. And again, the people who talked about that and wanted to do that, fortunately, the good news with that is that that movement never really got anywhere, okay,
Mm.
across the country. And no one really started getting rid of police, across, except maybe in certain pockets that I'm unaware of. But I can tell you from every major city that I'm aware of, when I was president of the National DA Association, that movement really didn't gain any traction.
And just my last thing, one of the latest cases I saw was there was this Louisville man arrested for kidnapping a mother and two kids on his way to a bank robbery. And then it turns out that he had robbed 22 people in the past and was out on bond, and he had done this 22 times. I guess I'm just wondering, like, just as I'm not a lawyer, I was never a DA, I'm just a reporter, but people hear these things and it just seems like common sense, like
No,
that these people shouldn't be let out.
no,
I
you're
guess I'm
you're
just
right.
wondering when you're sitting there, I mean, you were a judge too. When you're sitting there on the bench and these things are you just not paying are they not paying attention? Like, is it just paperwork? Like, I don't understand how it happens.
Well, it happens because you'll get a good criminal defense lawyer, who will argue that, judge, this individual, may have had some prior problems. He may have had a terrible track record, and served time and was all too familiar in the criminal justice system. But this individual has changed. And again, I don't know what happened here in Louisville, but I'm just kind of giving you a general thing that happens. All right, this individual has changed, Judge. All right, he or she is now a good citizen, got a job, started a family, teaches Sunday school, whatever it may be. And yes, Judge, he's now facing these charges here, but he doesn't deserve to be locked up, until he's found guilty. All right. And if you have a system, if you have a state where the overall guidelines are presumption of release, least restrictive measures, look at a person's financial situation, and if putting that person in jail is going to disrupt his life, he'll lose his job, it'll harm his family. These are all the arguments that defense lawyers make, and a prosecutor can get up there and say, Judge, no bail, no bail, no bail. And if a judge buys that and a judge lets him out, then that's on the judge.
So there's some bad cases that I've seen lately of this, but overall, big picture, do you think that this is swinging back in the other direction, that we're not going to see this happening as much?
Absolutely. I think that you're seeing, all across the country, there is a recognition that crime is still a problem. Now, what's happening though, unfortunately, Brian, is that people are looking at kind of macro 30,000 feet statistics. And those statistics show, and this is the argument being now used in Washington, D.C. right now, okay, where, those who are opposed to President Trump, bringing in the National Guard there in Washington, D.C., are making the argument that crime is down. And they're correct, okay? Crime is down. Crime is down all across the country, okay? But what it's down from is COVID, okay? Now, again, what one can make the argument that, you had levels of crime, it increased during COVID, and then now we're coming out of post-COVID, and now it's going back down again, all right? So, you have to look at statistics carefully here, but, in my opinion, even though crime is coming down, there is still too much crime. And crime is a problem, and public safety is a problem, and people care about that. And I think that, some of our elected leaders are starting to realize that. And, even some of our elected leaders in major cities, where crime is the biggest problem, who may be more progressive, are seeing that some of the policies that have been in place, especially since George Floyd, are not working. And again, we can all agree what happened to George Floyd was awful, uncalled for, should have never happened. And those who did it should be punished, and they are being punished because they're in jail now. But again, some of the policies, especially in the criminal justice system, that came out of the George Floyd situation, again, going back to the kind of the theme of this interview here, is they went too far.
Interesting. Well, Mr. Flynn, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.